3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hello and welcome back to a postseason recap of the Texas Private School podcast. I would say as always, but it's not really as always considering we have a much different lineup. For the first time ever, I am 1/5 of your hosting crew, Wes Tolleson, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Walker Lott joins me from College Station, Texas. Walker, I would normally hand it to you here to do some discussion, but they see you every week. You've got 3 new faces with us. We have Waverly West joining us from Bryan, Texas, Caleb Corum from Fort Worth, and Cole Burke joining us from Abilene. Guys, starting with Waverly, first of all, thank you for coming on. Second of all, give some background as to who you are and what you're interested in terms of how you've been helping us this year.
So hi, like Wes said, I'm Waverly West. I go to Brazos Christian School here in Bryan. I wrote lots of articles for TXPS Media this year, and definitely my favorite part of the season was going to cover the state championships with them. I did some interviews there, and it's been a blast interning with them.
Absolutely. Mr. Caleb?
Yeah, so I'm Caleb Corum, a senior at Southwest Christian School. I play football at SCS. I'm planning on going and studying sports media at Oklahoma State University, where I will emphasis in broadcasting. And I will do journalism there too, as well as hope and be a sports kind of journalist or reporter one day or broadcaster. And I've written a few articles for TXPS Media, taken some few videos at State. So grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Now to the best mullet in sports media, Cole Burke.
I'm Cole Burke. I'm a freshman at Hardin-Simmons University. I play center here. I've always been interested in sports media, especially the broadcasting side of it. That's what I plan to do when I'm older. I'm currently a communications major, which is the best program Hardin-Simmons has to set me up for a lifetime in sports media, whether that's broadcasting, journalism, whatnot. I've written a few game recaps for TXPS Media, done some live tweeting, and then got behind the camera at the state games, which was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I do want to take a second and say all of these guys are absolute rock stars. Our content wouldn't be half of what it's been this year without them. You've seen all of them behind the scenes this year, whether it's writing articles, live tweeting for us, these videos that'll come out from the state game. All of these guys have a very bright future in sports journalism, and we were very much blessed this season to have their help. So as we've said multiple times, thank all of you. It's been fantastic. Walker Lott, finally turned to you after a fantastic weekend at State. How have you been, and any quick takeaways from what you saw at State, although we'll get more into detail on that.
Yeah, no, State was fun, man. And, I just stayed busy, finals are here, and, that we go straight into that, no kind of week off from State. You go straight back into actually being a student. But yeah, State was actually really fun this year. We had 3 other people helping us out, which made it even more fun. But the games themselves, there was a lot more kind of not parody, but like they're all actually good games and not some just blowouts like usually. So it was a fun weekend.
Absolutely. It was a great time. And I will now take, at least a half second to gloat a little bit because we got to go over the pick record. I would flash the pick record trophy that I guess I would be presenting to myself since I won it last year. But
where is it? Where is it?
It's been unhomed. It's been misplaced. I'm not declaring it lost. I just don't have tabs on it at the moment. That's not important. There will be a new trophy. Long story short, last week Walker went 3-1. I swept State for the second year in a row, going 4-0. The final records are Walker went 193-59. I went 196-56. 78% on the year. I don't know how I got here. Pick record 7% increase from last year. Walker, I think more than anything, as much as I would like to take the next 5 minutes and gloat about my pick record, I think both of us had great years, and honestly, probably 2 of the best years that we've had since we started. Do we know ball?
Absolutely. I will congratulate you on the trophy, Hawk-S Minitas, as we should know. Very, very proud of you, sir. And I'm going to kind of put blame on Caleb Corum for a bit because 2 of those losses were SES's fault. So I'm going to blame our intern basically for my losses. That's how I'm going to kind of say it. But actually,
really quickly, Caleb, after y'all lost to Legacy and cost Walker that pick, he told me to go up to you and he told me not even to acknowledge you after the game.
that's just not
He
true.
was so mad that you lost on the pick. He said, "Don't even look Caleb's direction."
Lies. This is fake news. From my co-founder of TXPS Media. I would never do that to you, Caleb. But in general, very good season by the both of us. Very, very good records. And yeah, definitely can say we both know ball.
I agree. What I was thinking the other day, I just want to workshop this here. I think next year, whatever interns that we have next year, we take at least a few of them and we have we make it like a 5-person pick record for some more competition. I think that'd be really fun. So if we retain any of you from this season to the next season, I would really, really enjoy having like a big pick record every week and having more people participate in that. I think that would be fun. But that being said, that concludes the pick record. There will be a trophy next year that will be in. We'll figure that out later. But now we are going to move straight into, let's go to the state championship recap first, and we'll go back and look at our preseason rankings and discuss all of that. So first of all, we will start with the first game of the slate, Parish versus St. Thomas. Parish gets a 40-29 win, and that is their fifth. Yeah, it's their 5th straight state championship, back to back. Honestly, just a masterful performance between Daniel Novikov coaching, Sawyer Anderson at quarterback, Maddox Reed. The list goes on and on. Yeah. Kyle Hamburger also took away our defensive MVP of the state game with a crucial pick in the 3rd quarter. Yep. Walker, we said before the season, if there was any year for the South to get it done, it was this year. And Parish, it just says we're still here. Your thoughts on the Panthers walking away with the state title?
Yeah, man. This was since we've started covering the game, probably I guess since that Nolan Parish game back in 2019, 2018?
2020.
Oh yeah, 2020. Wow. Yeah, that was probably the most competitive game we've had. And there was times that you could have honestly said Houston St. Thomas was gonna pull out the win. That they took the lead in multiple times in that game, but they just couldn't get it done. And at the end of the day, it came down to turnovers. And, I love my guy, Dante Lewis, but that one interception and the fumble on the overhead snap in the late third quarter kind of cost them the game. And, in a game like the state championship, when you're playing a team like Parish, you just can't turn the ball over. You got to be perfect on every aspect of the game. And they just kind of weren't. And it didn't help that you could tell Johan Cardenas was hurt. He only had 17 carries, 60 yards still, but only 17 carries. That's not enough in that game. Maddox Reed on the other side, 34 carries, 193 yards, and 4 touchdowns. What a game from him. Very, very impressive on the day. And, it was kind of just like the turnovers kind of cost them St. Thomas's the win. But you got to be proud of that St. Thomas team. The fact that they had to make a state championship since 2001, never in the South. They always have this like you said, the South can never do it. And they finally got to the state championship, actually competed and had a chance to win it. You have to give credit to the St. Thomas team. They made H-Town proud in this one. Dante Lewis, Johan, Larry Benton, Luke Edgecombe, those guys, that senior class leaves a legacy of telling the Houston St. Thomas, like, hey, we can do it. Like, we can get here and we can win these type of games. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the team. Shout out to Rich McGuire for finally getting them there. I will talk about Parish in a second. I just have to give my flowers to those guys because, doing this for so long now, you've been able to see like kind of teams grow up. And when we started our first or second year, we gave Johan Cardenas underclassman of the year, and now he's going to Vandy, which is kind of crazy. But this senior class was something special. Tyler Day had 16 tackles on the day. Just in a very impressive performance. Luke Edgecombe, how many yards did he have receiving? 140 receiving. What a day from him. Luke Edgecombe had 117. Larry had 140. So great performances by both those senior receivers. And, St. Thomas leaves a legacy of a great season. On the other side, I mean, Novikov does what Novikov does, and the rest of those dudes followed suit. And I want to give credit to that Parish defensive line. that Parish defensive line all season, Dante could usually break out, explore, get out of the pocket, do what he usually does. But this game, he got sacked a couple times, and you don't really see that often. You got to give credit to Caleb Mitchell-Irving, Sattler in the middle. Those guys really disrupted their game plan. And, Maddox Reed, Darby, Bryson Fields, those receiving cores with, junior Purdue commit Sawyer Anderson was a great game for them. And, they walk out of there 5 straight state champions.
Absolutely. Just like I said, the word dynasty is almost an understatement at this point.
100%.
Very rarely do you see 5 straight state titles. Absolute masterclass from Parish. Cole Burke, you were also joining us on the sideline for this game. You had a couple very insightful comments that I liked. I'll bring up one. You said you were really impressed by Maddox Reed and Johan. 2 types of guys that scored, but immediately when they score, they just hand the ball to the official. I think that's a testament to 2 guys that have been in the end zone a lot. They act like they've been there before. What were your thoughts on just 2 elite running backs going head to head in that game?
I mean, it was a lot of fun to watch, especially behind great offensive line performances from both sides. Especially a guy I think is incredibly underrated from Parish is center Nate Weber.
Yeah.
That dude had someone on the ground every other play. He was the leader of the offensive line. He was making calls, correcting guys when they were wrong. And I was talking to him after the game. He said that's probably it for his football career, but there's always a spot for him here at Hardin-Simmons if he wants to change his mind. But yeah, the offensive line performances were great. And then obviously, once they get past the box, they make so many plays at the second level. Maddox Reed, especially, I hadn't seen him in person, even though I lived in Dallas for 18 years. That was my first time seeing him. Hadn't watched his film at all. I'd done a lot of research on Johan going into it because, Mizzou was in his top 2, and I had to see what we were going to get if he committed there. But Maddox Reed he's a dude, man. And like you said, they're both such humble guys. They're just there to handle business. They get in the end zone, they give the ball back, they're on the sideline, ready to go and do it again the next drive, which was awesome to see 2 guys of that caliber playing with that humility and that drive to just, they're there for the team. They're there to do what's best for the team.
Absolutely. Yeah, you really do like seeing that. At the end of the day, Parish does get the win here, 5 straight state championships behind, and just an incredible season at the end of the day from Maddox Reed. I watched Parish, I think 3 times this season, and Maddox just shined in all of those games. Very impressive, very well-rounded team effort. Congratulations to Parish on a 5th consecutive Division I state title. Now we will move into a game that we were all able to cover, so we'll have some great group input from everyone. That is Liberty Christian versus Austin Regents. And, I had a bunch of Liberty players go back a week before that game. Right after they won, I had a bunch of Liberty players come up and ask me, is Quinn playing? And I was like, I don't know. We know a lot, but I don't quite have that information yet. And we figured out about 15 minutes before the game started, whenever Quinn walked out in a boot, that Quinn would not be playing that game. We're like, because Liberty was obviously a pretty stark favorite going into that game for obvious reasons, but
Yeah.
And no slight to Jack Devine at all, but Quinn Murphy is a Power 5 target, the Michigan offered man. I mean, he's very talented. Not playing in that game is going to significantly affect the game plan, and it did, as Liberty gets the win 52-10 here. Walker, very briefly, so we can give it to the interns. Great dominant performance from Liberty, as they really did the entire season, finishing the season 14-0. Your thoughts on the Warriors winning a D2 state title?
I mean, this team, top to bottom, is one of the most talented teams we've ever seen in private school. When we were in the elevator, West, one of the things I'll definitely mention is we were some of the coaches over at Regents were walking out of the elevator and said, that's the most talented team. That's more talented than the Cedar Hill Trinity Christian days, those teams that they always met in the state championship. And that's a testament. And they said it was almost equal in talent, but the coaching by that Liberty squad was phenomenal. It was light years ahead of those teams from back in the day. And that's a credit to that coaching staff that Jason Wooden's put together. You know what I mean? So those guys, plus the combination of all the talented players they have, put the recipe for success. And they went 14-0 and won the big one this year. Shout out to them.
Surely that wasn't a shot at Dion, was it?
No, not at all. I think 14-0, first state championship since 09, 07. So it's been a while for them, man. Congratulations.
Absolutely. We've got we've got an article on the site detailing what it was like to play against those Cedar Hill teams. Maybe we can get somebody that, Caleb, maybe you can write an article on what it was like to play against the Liberty teams. I like to see the perspective there. But Caleb, we'll actually go straight to you. You got to watch Liberty versus Regents as well as all of us. What really stuck out to you and just how dominant Liberty was in this game?
What stood out to me most was the Liberty offense. I mean, they're not one-dimensional at all. Running behind Keithan Smith and Nate Humphrey is a great opportunity for Chase Garnett, and Chase Garnett's an absolute stud at running back. But that, if you stop the run game, they're just going to throw it over top with Cole Welliver, as he can throw it to Quentin Brown, Jalen Hawkins, and Brady Janusek, who are all stud star receivers. And so they just were incredible. And their defense is slept on. Their offense has all like the crazy little like showboaty, like talented athletes out there, but their defense is very strong. Their defensive line plays hard and physical. Their linebackers come in and crash down, led by CJ Witten. And then the young safety or athlete, Cooper Witten, is insane too. So he's going to be someone to watch out for the future.
Absolutely. No, I like that you bring up the defense because the offense has gotten shine all year, and it's hard not to with athletes like Stump, Janusek, Cole Welliver, Chase Garnett. Again, I could go on and on and on about the talent. The defense is, I think, what sets this team apart with guys like CJ and Cooper Witten. Jet Hare is a guy I like a lot, the sophomore at linebacker. He's going to be a force for years to come. You got Maddox Sakiri and who could forget Max Saul on the defensive line. Just fantastic talent. Also, a facet of this team that I think was really their heart the entire year. The receiving corps gets a ton of love, from me especially, but the run game was elite, running behind Humphreys and Smith. Garnett going crazy all year. Waverly, you got the opportunity to interview not only Chase Garnett, but also Nate Humphreys and Keithan Smith. What were your thoughts and your takeaways from the run game and what you got to hear from the guys that made it happen post-game?
Yeah, it was great talking to all those guys after the game. Chase Garnett had 3 touchdowns, and I think their quarterback also threw 3 touchdowns, which just shows, kind of like Caleb said, that there's not just one aspect of their offense that really sticks out. Their offensive production is spread between receiving, rushing, passing, like all of that. They're just incredible. It was great to talk to those guys, and they seemed like their offensive line unit was just so dominant and could get it done against anybody they played this year.
Absolutely, and they really did. I think I set probably what will stand as a record for the amount of times I covered a single team in a single season. I think I saw Liberty like 5 times, and they managed to get better every single week. It was the consistency that set them apart, because you'll have great teams that usually they'll slip up at least one week and they'll get caught by someone they're not supposed to lose to. Liberty, wire to wire, ran the table. It was honestly very, very dominant to watch. Cole Burke, you were on hand as well. We kind of hit on a ton of what made Liberty dominant. Anything that you took away from this game, you're like, wow, that was impressive.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I've heard the name Cole Welliver mentioned yet. Quarterback for Liberty. He was phenomenal. Obviously nothing against UConn. It's FBS football. I don't understand how he's not going somewhere bigger. He has the height, he has the weight, he has the arm length. He throws one of the most beautiful balls that I've ever seen. He was making plays left and right, whether it was on his feet sometimes scrambling, or, throwing the ball to Janusek in the back corner, or even working around his slot receivers or throwing it to Chase Garnett out of the backfield. That dude was making plays left and right. And then, as you mentioned, Max Saul at defensive end, big number 99. He is a stud. If I'm not mistaken, Walker, I believe he was your player of the game in the semifinals. And
that was all West, but yeah, what a player in that semifinal game.
Yeah, he was impressive to watch. I enjoyed watching Max Saul get after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've told this story before. I don't know if it's on the podcast, but Walker and I went by Liberty Christian in the spring, and our eyes were drawn to Keithan Smith and Nate Humphreys because they're gigantic. And, Saul is imposing physically, but not to the point those offensive linemen are. We were watching one-on-ones, or as an Oklahoma drill, and we watched, and Saul got up against one of them. I won't name who, but he absolutely eviscerated the offensive lineman he was up against, went and just mauled the running back. And I was like, Max Saul is probably going to be a guy to watch moving forward. And he was, man. He was elite. Yeah, I'll say in terms of Regents, we haven't talked about them a lot. A fantastic season by them. You can't, their season is not at all defined by this state game. No. Almost literally anyone in the state would meet that same fate, if not worse, to Liberty. Guys like Jacob Wilburn, Chili Sayer,
Hudson.
all of them. Yeah, Hudson Powell, just fantastic seasons from all of them. A ton of collegiate talent on that team, and especially Jack Devine stepping up in a very difficult situation. In a state title game, your first start against far and away the best team in the state, maybe the best team that we have seen in D2 ever. Hats off to them. Moment didn't look too big for him, even faced against kind of insurmountable odds. Just hats off to Regents. Fantastic season.
Yeah, Regents, that senior class was also a team that won a state championship their freshman year, if you remember, like that. It's kind of full circle since, that one guy got picked off for DC and brought it all the way back, that was a game where Cole definitely remembers that too. But, on the flip side, this team knows how to go to a state championship, and they got there, this final senior year, and they just ran into just a team like Liberty that it's honestly kind of impossible to beat. But the senior class is phenomenal, and a lot of those guys are homegrown, been there for 4 or 5 years now, and it's just a very, very impressive. And I like Jack Devine. I think he's going to be a great player going forward. He flashed some glimpses of like being glimpses. Thank you. Flashed some glimpses of being like an actually really good athlete. He's a really good athlete as well. That sophomore class, and they lose a tough senior class with a lot of, talented players. But that sophomore class, Andrew Novi, Blake Smith, Quinn Murphy, Cade Millington, there's a couple guys, man, that are young and are going to be really, really good. And we're going to probably see this team back here next year. I'm excited to watch them play. But on the other side, I'll mention one last thing about Liberty is, Wes, we always talk about like how All Saints in the past 2 years, when they bring all these guys in, sometimes they don't gel as fast. You know what I mean? Where it takes a couple times, maybe gets in the district and they finally like put it together. That's what they did last year. You know what I mean? You have to give credit for Liberty, even though they brought all these guys in. Cole Welliver comes in, in the spring semester of last year, and comes in, and the fact that they came together, all these dudes, and they gelled perfectly. Like from the start to the finish, those guys knew what they wanted to do, and offensively they were so dominant defensively as well. Like, you have to give credit for this team coming all together, and it was just a very, very, very impressive performance. And I want to shout out one last guy that a lot of guys, they give him a lot of love, is the center for Liberty, Antonio Simone, first team All-State, and is a guy that I believe was there before the Witten era. I kind of grew up in the ranks of Liberty, and you could tell like he was one of their leaders of being like, hey, this is being before Witten, and like, they were in some rough years at Liberty, and being able to see where they are now. He's a guy that kind of bought into that program that's been there for a while, and you want to give a shout out to him. So yeah, what a season for Liberty.
Absolutely. First state title since 2007, I believe. Fantastic storybook season, 14-0 undefeated. Shout out to Liberty Christian, the TAPS D2 state champions. We'll now move on to the second day. The noon game was the TAPS Division III state championship, Dallas Christian versus Holy Cross, where Holy Cross puts up a great fight as we expected, but DC comes away with the win 28-13. Cole Burke, I feel like I'd be doing an injustice to turn to anyone except you first. DC gets their third straight state title. You are part of the last two. What did you really see in this game? Because Holy Cross came out and really played a DC style of smash mouth football, but DC ultimately holds them off, gets the win. What stuck out to you?
First off, I got to give my props to Holy Cross. They played an amazing game, physically dominant in the second and third quarter. Up front, outside, they were dominating for half the game. So props to Holy Cross, man. They played an amazing game representing the 210, which was a huge theme for their fans and their players watching pregame warm-up, was representing their city. And on the Dallas Christian side, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. And Dallas Christian has quite a few of those. Got to give props to my guy, Porter Nix. Played an amazing game, both sides of the ball. He had me stressing a little bit there in the fourth quarter. I was a little scared we were going to lose the streak. He pulled the team together. He's a great leader, even better young kid. Or man, I'd say he's a man, not a kid anymore. And he played an amazing game. And then obviously DJ Lampkins, who's an underrated prospect on that team. trying to get my best to get him to come to Hardin Simmons here, but he is a leader, played a great game at middle linebacker, and I'm really excited to see what his future holds.
Absolutely. Cole, is the X's and O's Jimmy and Joe's quote, is that a Mike Wheelerism?
It's a James Burke quote. My father, he's a big X's and O's or Jimmy's and Joe's kind of guy. So got that from my dad.
I remember one of our old Grace coaches said that back in the day, and I would like to trace that back and see where it stemmed from. But it's an all-time quote. It's an all-time euphemism. But so we had both Waverly and Caleb were at this game as well. Waverly, DC, third straight state title, a great fight from Holy Cross. A lot of storylines in this game. What stuck out to you specifically?
I wanted to start out by talking about Holy Cross's quarterback, Gibby Alvarado. There was a point in the game where I don't really know the extent of his injury, but he kind of went down for a couple of plays, and you could just really tell the whole crowd rallied around him, and he ended up going back in, if I'm not mistaken. So really just shows his perseverance and how that team really fought to the end against obviously an incredible Dallas Christian team. Dallas Christian dominant. It was a closer game than I think anybody really expected, but Dallas Christian got it done, and that's 3 in a row.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's speaking more to the crowd rallying and just the crowd in general from Holy Cross. It was a fantastic scene there. I loved seeing them show out in mass to support their guys. That means a lot to me. I love seeing that type of support in the game. It makes everything a lot more enjoyable, a lot more fun when you can really rally a town, or not San Antonio's much more of a city than a town behind a team. Also, I kind of thought this was a given, but I realized that Walker and I are old and some people might not understand the reference. For the last couple seasons, whenever we're talking about Gibby Alvarado from Holy Cross, we do Gibby. So that comes from iCarly. There was a character called Gibby on iCarly. I realized talking to Caleb, trying to explain the reference, Caleb's like, I don't know what that means. I was like, oh, that might be a dated reference now. Long story short, Gibby's from iCarly. Haven't seen it, go watch it. Caleb, first of all, thank you for making me feel old about 5 times throughout the course of the state weekend. But yeah, exactly. Maybe. So perfect. Again, just in name only. But Caleb, Holy Cross falls to DC. Great fight from both squads, but ultimately DC comes away with the win. Your thoughts on what you witnessed at the state game?
Yeah, with Holy Cross, man, they're from the pregame warmups, their fans were there. They were ready to go. They were cheering. They had some elementary football kids out there talking to us before the game, screaming, "Let's go Holy Cross," and getting excited. And then one guy who stood out for me, he plays linebacker, number 7, Jeremiah Vallejo. That guy is an absolute mauler around that football field, man. He is physical, he's fast, and he's going to hit somebody as hard as he can. And then with DC, with them winning their 3rd straight state championship, Luke Carney throwing for 2 touchdowns, Jaden Davis rushing for another 2, and of course Speedy Nettles catching the ball and being a standout lockdown corner. So Dallas Christian putting up almost another dynasty run.
Absolutely. Yeah. DC, one of the top programs traditionally in the state by wins, state titles, wins by a head coach, just really fantastic. Walker, Will Nettles comes away with our defensive player of the game.
Yeah.
For basically locking down an entire side of the field. Also had 172 yards receiving and a touchdown on offense, as well as Luke Carney throwing for 280, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a 78% completion rate. Really no mistakes by those 2 guys, as well as Jaden Davis, who had 122 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Holy Cross, made this close by running the ball extremely efficiently and trying to keep DC's offense off the field. DC won this game by not making any mistakes on offense. Your thoughts on the Chargers coming away with 3 straight?
Yeah, it was, this is a game where, Dallas Christian got hit in the mouth, and, how do they respond? Like you kind of said it from the beginning, right? Like, they kind of played their style of football against them, which is kind of what you need to do to have a chance to play and beat DC. And, they got hit in the mouth, but, one good thing about, Mike Wheeler and that DC squad is they'll hit you right back. And that's kind of exactly what they did. And they relied on their dudes, which there's no more talent. There's not a more talented team in Division III than, of course, Dallas Christian. And it's led by Speedy Nettles, who leaves a legacy at DC with helping them win 3 straight state championships, one of the best players to ever come out of DC. And man, yeah, he phenomenal. Like, it was the type of thing where, like, all right, we need to play. All right, let's go to 3 and let him go to work. And that's kind of what they did multiple times. He relied on DJ, Jaden Davis, and guy like Luke Carney. You could tell he's kind of banged up with his ankle supposedly from last week. He doesn't. You don't even show it really at all, and he just makes the plays he needs to do. And it was just an overall really impressive game where, even when they got close or some drives stalled because of the great play by this Holy Cross team, their guys kind of came to play. And that, at the end of the day, like Cole said, I'm not going to say exactly the term because I'm not going to, mess it up, but his saying, kind of won them the game. But on the other side, what a season for Holy Cross, Wes, because we talked about it when, like, in the preseason, where I believe we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but we had Cypress and TCS Lubbock ranked higher than Holy Cross going into this year because, we were like, okay, they've never gotten over the hump of beating Cypress in the South. Cypress has John Kelly, all this. And last week, in the semifinal round, they absolutely just hold Cypress to as many, like, nothing. And then on the other flip side, I've never seen a team kind of like scare DC in a way where it was kind of like, oh wow, like, and I want to say that, like, they need to be impressed of what they've done this season and against a team like DC where anyone really in the North kind of like, all right, DC comes into town, it's kind of that kind of scary thing. And that Holy Cross team doesn't get scared by anyone. They fight tooth and nail until the very end. That's what they did. And you got to give credit to that team. Daniel Alonso, Jeremiah Vallejo, Patrick Ortiz. That team is full of dudes. Nick Hall, Daniel Perez. They have just dudes, man. And I was very, very impressed coming out of that team of what that senior class means. We talked about it with St. Thomas earlier of, like, Holy Cross finally got over the hump and they can stay over the hump, especially with Cypress moving up to Division 2 next year. They're the favorites come out of the South in Division 3 next year. They have to be. And, they have Gibby Alvarado returning and everyone else. That team can finally say, hey, we can do this and get to the state championship again. And that's the culture they have now set at Holy Cross. And you have to be proud of them. What they did for, like, what Caleb and Cole said about them, what they put on for their city, it's very, very inspiring. And you got to give those guys some love.
Absolutely. I was going to make a joke and say, whenever you said a lot of teams are scared when they play DC, I was going to say Grace Community was never scared when they played DC, but I specifically remember sitting in Dallas Christian's visitors field house and thinking, I'm going to have to go play against Palmer Nix. And I don't know if I'd use the word scared, but genuinely concerned is probably a good adjective there. So yeah, there's always that kind of sense playing against DC, but Holy Cross sure didn't show it and put on a great showing in the D3 state championship. So that'll conclude our discussion there. We have one final game to talk about, the last game of the slate. TAPS Division 4 state championship. Dallas First Baptist beats Lubbock Christian 55-33. So I will turn to Waverly West, our resident Division 4 expert. Waverly, you saw both of these teams this season. You saw Lubbock Christian, or you saw First Baptist week 1. You saw Lubbock Christian in the playoffs. I will ask, going into this game, what were your thoughts on the matchup and who you thought might win? Because there was some conversation from talking heads around the state that Lubbock Christian might be the favorite in this game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's no doubt that those two teams were the two best in the state and deserve to be there. Obviously, Lubbock's starting quarterback from the beginning of the season, Wilker Horn, he was out for most of playoffs, I want to say. And so Luke Lee did a great job moving to quarterback and getting them to the state championship. But man, First Baptist, that offense is just absolutely incredible. You have Hunter McCoy at quarterback. You have Elijah Kaysen, obviously historic season, and then Caleb Mitchell, all just incredible. And you can't, if you go to contain one player, then another player on that offense just steps up. And I know there was some talk, but obviously First Baptist dominated Lubbock, and rightfully so. They deserve to be the state champion.
Absolutely. I remember week 1 of the season, we went by, I saw both Brazos Christian and First Baptist in the spring, and both teams looked incredibly impressive. And, from a talent standpoint, looking into that week 1 game, I was like, yeah, it's going to be difficult. And I kind of fell back on, Brazos Christian was very good last year. First Baptist was kind of meh. We'll see. And I picked Brazos Christian, and First Baptist just came out. I don't want to bring up bad memories, but First Baptist did come out and just absolutely waylay them. And that is due in large part, we figured out, to Hunter McCoy transferring in. A lot of this is very much the same team from last year with Hunter McCoy, one of the most dynamic athletes we've ever seen in private school football, really the key that unlocked this offense. Walker, just very quickly, speak to the prominence of Hunter McCoy entering this First Baptist offense and how that shot them up, how one player shot them up so far from last year.
Man, when he was a sophomore, I was like, okay, who is this kid out in Weatherford, Texas? Because, small town, they're now in 6-man, so they're a small school up and coming out there. You always heard of like Willow Park, but then you're like, okay, going 20 minutes down the road more, there's a Weatherford Christian, and you learn more about them. They had a good squad, and remember his junior year, he was the Lubbock killer. That team beat Lubbock Christian with him at the helm, and everyone was like, okay, what is this team? What's going on out there? And then you watch his junior film, and you're like, holy cow, this kid can play. And I believe he was our offensive player of the year, something like that, Wes. And for good reason. Holy cow! And what he brings to an offense is just versatility. Like what he's able to do with his legs or with his arm. What is it? 85 touchdowns, Wes, this year? Like 80, something like that. I mean, insane. Like what you're able to do with him in an offense at that level, especially, is phenomenal. And, if you want to go talk here about a little bit more about his character, go listen to Jason Lavorne's interview that we have on our Twitter of talking about he has the it factor, and he absolutely does. When you watch him play, some guys just know how to play and just know what to do to win. And he's one of those dudes, man. Phenomenal player. It's sad to watch him leave, because what he did for Division 4 these past couple of years has been nothing short of just fantastic. And whatever college wants him to play quarterback for them, or any athlete, whatever they want him to play, they're going to be very lucky to have him on their team. He's a great player.
Absolutely. 381 all-purpose yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. Just one of the best performances we've ever seen by a single player in the state game. But the game wasn't necessarily won by a single player. First Baptist just came out and had guys everywhere, whether it was Elijah Kaysen, Dominic Sadu, Caleb Mitchell. Caleb Corum, you saw a lot of great talent as well. What really stuck out to you in this game with First Baptist winning the D4 state title?
I mean, obviously, like how y'all mentioned before with Hunter McCoy and the 3 D1 receivers of Elijah Kaysen, Dominic Sadu, and Caleb Mitchell. But on the defensive side, George Agnostis, he had about, I think, 12 total tackles in the game. So he was sending a message where, First Baptist offense is incredible, and they're all air raid, and they're going to punch in the end zone. But on defense, their defense showed up when they needed them to. They were hard hitting, and they flew the ball well.
Yeah, absolutely. George Agnostis, a freshman at First Baptist, a quarterback by trade that's playing linebacker this year. I'm glad you brought him up. That is going to be a name to watch for the next 3 years in Texas high school football. That kid is going to be a fantastic talent. Mark Raysom also is a great player. Corey Thomas, the sophomore, I will say, like I mentioned, I went by First Baptist in the spring. Corey looked good, but then I saw him in the Lubbock Christian game that I went to cover, and that kid grew like 2 inches and put on like 30 pounds. He looks like a legit D1 talent now. Has D1 offers, I think an Arizona State offer. That kid is going to be one to watch as well. A ton of talent in this First Baptist team. They bring a lot back next year. They're going to be here to stay for a long time. But yes, Walker.
I want to say, you talk about him, another guy, number 85, Mark Gutierrez. That number, the big guy, they have a loaded sophomore class. Like you talk about it, Micah Foster, Dominic Sadu, Mark Gutierrez, who's the guy you just mentioned?
Raysom?
Yeah,
Not,
and Core Thomas too.
Yeah, Corey.
Those guys, they have a loaded sophomore class, and we talked about it with the team. We were talking with one of the coaches, and they were talking about like, hey, next year all of those guys come back. and they only lose, I think, like 2 or 3 seniors, and that team is going to be loaded on defense. Where this year they won their games a lot on offense, and they're going to have George probably a quarterback next year with Dominic Sadu and Caleb Mitchell, so they'll be fine offensively, but they're going to win games defensively, and that with Core Thomas and guys like that, it's going to be a scary sight for another Division 4 year.
Absolutely. It will be incredibly fun to watch. We will see that next season. But with that being said, that's actually all the recap that we have from the state game. Now we're going to move into some storylines. We put a Q&A up a couple of days ago when I was in the midst of finals, so it gave me some distraction from studying for financial modeling, which I was greatly appreciative for. But we'll get into some of that. First one that I'm very interested in, there's been a lot of talk about, is regarding the venue. For the last 3 years, I think, the game has been at Waco ISD Stadium. It was at Midway before that. There was a lot of commentary, not a lot of which was positive, regarding Waco ISD Stadium. A lot of people, didn't seem to like it. I don't think it's so much Waco ISD as a venue as it is comparing it against AT&T or other big venues where they have the games. Personally, I think Waco ISD is fine. There wasn't anything glaringly bad about it, in my opinion, but I think it's the comparison to AT&T and where UIL holds state. Walker, I'll turn to you first. What are your thoughts on the venue? Was there anything glaringly wrong with it? And your kind of thoughts on the commentary regarding Waco ISD as a venue?
I mean, I kind of think it like this, where, we could talk about this more later because it's a huge discussion in private school football. I mean, you can talk about a con where, what fan section of any team up to Division 1 really fills out their side of the fans at there? Like, no one really fills their stands at Waco ISD. So if you go put it in McLean or somewhere like that, is it going to look that different? You know what I mean? It's going to be not that many people in a larger stadium, so it's going to be louder in a stadium like this. So you can talk about that side of it. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to your point, Wes, like the comparison of AT&T, because, you work all this season, you get all this way, you want it in a really cool stadium. And, I understand that 100%. And, playing in a team like the Alamo Dome or, NRG or another dome stadium like AT&T is a really cool thing. And, a lot of people work a lot of time, a lot of hard work to get to a point that they have a really cool venue. If you want to do it in a team like I like McLean, I don't know why you wouldn't try to do it in a place like UMHB right down the road in Belton, small private school there. There's some good venues around the state that you could really look into that have like that feel, but are a little bit nicer and look really, really cool as a college stadium. So, I think it's definitely a conversation. I would love to hear like guy like Cole, his perspective, because, you played a couple years there. What are your thoughts of the stadium that y'all played in?
I enjoyed it personally. To a lot of us, it didn't matter where we played or who we played. We were just there to play ball.
Yeah.
But playing at a stadium like Baylor would be a really cool experience, especially because, in private school, there's a lot of people whose parents went to Baylor. They grew up Baylor fans.
True.
I'm sure that'd be a really cool experience for a lot of the guys. Me personally, I was fine with the stadium. The locker rooms were really nice. I really like the locker rooms at Waco ISD. They got the nice, mahogany wooden lockers with the little metal lockbox up top. Not too bad. UMHB, I got to play there this year for Devo football at Hardin Simmons. Would not recommend that. Their turf is like probably 12 years old, or since the stadium was built.
Yeah.
So it's not very good. Until they redo the turf, I wouldn't recommend that. And yeah, I like Waco ISD, but a place like Baylor or McLean Stadium would be awesome for a lot of kids.
I definitely agree with that. Mr. Caleb Corm, you were at the venue as well. Anything really stick out to you about Waco ISD? Were anything egregiously bad or great that you liked about it?
I get the whole thing of wanting to compare it to AT&T Stadium. As a former player, I wanted to play at the coolest stadiums that I could when we made playoffs. But, I liked that Waco ISD, the stadium was big, but it wasn't too big. So we're like Walker and everyone else here said that the stadium could feel more full. The fans could feel out the bottom section of the bowl better. So just like that, it did feel, I guess, a little older in some parts, but I feel like it made up for it. I liked the turf, the way it felt there. So I thought it was a good venue.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you can talk too much good about the turf, because I did what there is a screenshot of both you and Walker face down on the turf slipping in the middle of a race. Our good friend No Context posted that, but yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. It's wasn't overly great or bad. Waverly, before we move on from the discussion regarding the venue, anything really stick out to you regarding Waco ISD?
I think y'all touched on most of it. It's not really realistic for private schools to fill up like a huge stadium. So I thought that aspect, like y'all said, was cool that it still felt pretty full. But once again, it's a great reward for players to get to play somewhere bigger that's not just like a high school. And so, pros and cons.
I agree. And I will say, I'll get to you in a second. I will say that, it's easy for me to sit here and, remove from the game and say that, listen, you shouldn't care about where you're going to play. It's all the same. It's not that bad. But at the end of the day, I remember when I ran track, because we weren't ever near good enough to compete for a state title. But whenever I ran track a few years before me, the state meet was always at Baylor, and I thought that was the coolest thing on the planet. And finally, when we got good enough that I could run at state my junior and senior year, they had it at Waco Midway, and I was like, man, this kind of sucks. Like, I really wanted to go run at Baylor. That'd be really cool. So, like I said, it's easy to say, oh, you shouldn't care that much, but at the end of the day, I think a cool venue would mean a lot to the kids. That being said, we have heard some discussions regarding potential cooler venues. When I say cooler, I mean a lot cooler than Waco ISD. So don't think that's not in the works. We've heard from some pretty reputable people that they're working on that. So just hang tight. It should be coming.
Yeah. The one thing I have to mention, because why don't y'all do it at the Star? I mean, you could go talk to the old pal Jason Wynn, and it's not that big of a stands. You would probably fill it up pretty well. It's enclosed. It's in a dome. Wouldn't be a that bad spot. And private school would probably travel from Houston and Austin to go up there and San Antonio to go watch it. So, I mean, I also think too, like, I think it also depends on the schools too, because you have to get like, I think if you want a state championship, like especially in this time of year, like it should be bus loads. Like put kids on a bus, ship them up there, and go watch the game, and build a giant student section. Like doing stuff like that for your schools and your ADs getting involved too on the sports side of things. I think that's really what it's about, because one of the best things about private school is I'll say it to the end. I think student sections in private school outnumber a lot of public schools. Not every one of them, but a lot of them. And I think having that as a difference maker in games is really, really cool. So I think if you get the fans behind it, you have a lot of packed crowds, moving into a bigger stadium is going to be a really cool experience for a lot of people.
I agree. My one question with that would be, would there be any pushback from non-Dallas schools that it would be, quote unquote home field advantage? Because Walker, you're much more familiar with UIL than I am,
Yeah.
with it being at AT&T for a while. Do you see a lot of pushback there?
So I know for UIL, there's always discussion because they want to rotate it between the Alamodome, NRG, and AT&T, because they want everyone in the state to get involved, which there's a good part of it. But if you do the math, I know Matt Stepp tweeted it out and said the difference of miles traveled by the teams who made the state championship, of those three stadiums, the lowest amount is always AT&T. So for driving wise, it's the best situation for all those schools to do it up in DFW, which, I mean, if you compare it to teams in DFW or teams in private school, I mean, majority of the state champion winners are always from DFW usually. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to do it from DFW. And, those teams in San Antonio, Austin, and Houston would have to drive more, but I mean, it's not a bad idea if a lot of the teams usually are from the DFW area. So you do have to have that discussion. So
I agree. Yeah, it's always a discussion to have, but I'm sure there will be a lot more conversation going forward. Like I said, we've gotten some word that we're going to have some, much more interesting venues at least looked at in the near future. So it would be very exciting to see some of that materialize. Another storyline we're going to hit into is, it's the R word. It's something we try to stay away from a little bit, but it's regarding recruiting, and it appears that it works. And, I'm not going to come out and define recruiting, but in this case, I'm going to say it's guys that had a lot of kids that transferred in, had a lot of success this year. Teams like Parish, Liberty, DC, First Baptist, even, First Baptist, not really. That could even fall into homegrown, because a lot of those kids were there, at least last year. But
yeah.
Walker, I mean, the 4 state champions were 4 guys. Did you see a lot of roster turnover from a year-to-year basis? I mean, do you think that's directly because of recruiting? Do you think it's also has a lot to do with good coaching? There's a lot of questions we had there.
I mean, I think I think for DC and Liberty, yeah. If you had 11 Porter Nixes on every side of the ball, you would have a really good squad. But there's a difference of that in DC. Same with Liberty. Having a guy like Cole Belliver, Jalen Hawkins, Nick Blevins, the list goes on and on and on. Those guys were really difference makers for that team. And I mean, from the stuff we hear, it's not like it's not going to be the same next year. You know what I mean? Parish is the same way. How many Jalen Pyle, Jesse Richardson, the other linebacker, whatever his name is, Caleb Bowers, guys like that, they're difference makers that all transferred in. It's the name of the game in public and in private. Don't ever say that it's not in public school as well, because it happens all the time. But teams like St. Thomas, where majority of their team was homegrown, where I think Johan came in 8th grade. I know Dante came last year, so that's a little different, but Regents is the epitome of homegrown. Those guys have been there since preschool, and they get there every single year. It's just they don't get over the hump every year, and they've had to deal with that with Cedar Hill, Liberty, guys like that every single year. And then Holy Cross, I mean, I know Nick Hall came from Central Catholic, but besides that, most of those dudes have grown up in Holy Cross. Same with Lubbock Christian, because there's not that many teams out there that really transfer in and out in Lubbock. But it's transferring in the transfer portal, and I don't know why I can't, it's such an interesting topic, which, I mean, in this day and age, like you see in college football, if you're not reaching out and trying to get kids to come to your school, you're not going to have a chance at the at state championships. But at the same time, we were talking with some people, other schools, and they were like, staying homegrown and staying like that, it makes those championships much more sweeter, because you've been up and you've grown through the years with those guys. So there is the thing of like, all right, you win a state championship. I mean, you still won one. How does that feel compared to being homegrown? It's an interesting topic, which, I mean, recruiting's not going to stop. It's not like it's been around for years and years and years. So it's an interesting topic, but to our point, it kind of worked this year pretty dang well. And First Baptist is not really a recruiting town or recruiting school, but a guy like Hunter McCoy, a difference maker, he came in. I mean, how much of a difference maker would they have won a state championship without him at the helm,
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to open this conversation up to everyone, because I think it's something that's incredibly interesting. I've always said forever, I'm not going to be this guy that sits here and says recruiting's awful, it's evil, it's ruining the sport. I definitely kind of held that stance in high school, because Grace wasn't a school that recruited, and I didn't like playing teams like DC and Brook Hill that had really good talent every year. But at the end of the day, it's part of the game. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's ruining the sport. It's the way it is. So Cole, I'm curious to see your opinions, not because you're from DC, but it's just kind of the way it's the way it is now. There's transfers all the time. It seems, do you think to be competitive, there needs to be pretty significant roster turnover from a year-to-year basis?
I think since I was a sophomore, especially till now, the recruiting aspect has, I wouldn't say blown out of proportion, but it has increased substantially. I mean, I was at Dallas Christian my sophomore year. We brought in, Sean Coleman, Tristan Turner, and Jaden Jones. And this year, I look at the guys we bring in, it's more and more every year. And it's the same like that across most private schools, especially the DFW, because of the saturation of talent there is. Yeah. I think a comparison for it is schools like Regents, I have the utmost respect for doing it their way. But they're like Clemson and Dabo Swinney. He's not a transfer portal guy. That's the way the game is played now. And they're going to go 8-4, 7-5 every year, because he doesn't believe in the transfer portal NIL. Everyone else is on that new wave, like Oregon or, Georgia, or all these guys getting transfers in, and they're winning championships. They're going 10-2, 11-1. It's the way the game is being played now. And you can respect the way that they used to do it and how it used to be played, but the game's evolving. And the transfer portal of high school football is a huge aspect of it. And a lot of teams need to hop on that ship if they want to continue to have success.
I completely agree. Dabo Sweeney comment made me laugh because I have my own personal opinions about Dabo Sweeney, so that got me a chuckle. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think this is kind of a situation where, you need to hop on or it's going to pass you by. And I'm sure at some point there's going to be some team that's going to win state with homegrown players. And I'm going to get chirped for this comment, but I really do think, a lot of people that have been slow to embrace it are having to, because that's just the way you compete now. Waverly, even in D4, we see teams that get a lot of talent in and out from year to year. I mean, what are your thoughts? Kind of the same questions I asked Cole. It really seems like you need to embrace, the quote unquote high school transfer portal, which I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's a real thing. What are your thoughts on the prevalence of it and the need to compete in private school football?
Yeah, I mean, like y'all said, the sport is gonna change over years. And I don't know, 10 years ago, this definitely was not much of an issue as it is now. But it is almost to the point where you either recruit players to come to your school or you kind of get left in the dust, honestly. Especially, I mean, yes, we talked about Division 4, how it is somewhat, but especially Division 1 and Division 2, it really is just, hey, come on, come play with us. And it is, if you win a state championship like Liberty or Parish did, that is I don't want to say like a positivity for recruiting, but I mean, it does make players want to come to you more if you do win like those
Yep.
two teams did. And so it's just kind of a never ending cycle, I would say.
I completely agree. And listen, at the end of the day, it gets more talent into private school football, which, from a selfish aspect, I like covering really good players. And the higher the level of talent, the more I think of a spotlight starts to get shifted towards private school athletics. So, the old saying goes, a rising tide lifts all ships. It could be the same type of situation here, but I was going to say it's yet to be seen because this is kind of a new phenomenon. That's a complete lie. This has happened forever. This has happened since I was in middle school. It might be at an increasing pace now, but don't let people tell you this is a new thing. It's not. Caleb, I'm interested to hear your perspective because you are the one guy on this panel right now that, actively played in football this last year. What are your thoughts on the prevalence of recruiting and how, what was it like? What's it like to play in it now?
With recruiting now, it's kind of just adapt or die. It comes with the territory of the game now. Playing against it, I mean, it's always been around pretty much since I've been in high school. Kids would transfer in, especially after a team would have a really good year. So it just comes with the territory. But I think the part that we're missing out on is the kids who are transferring in, they have to be accepted into the culture of the school. If they don't get accepted to the culture of the school, then, they're not going to mesh well. They're not going to bond well. And you saw that in Liberty this year where it seemed like they all actually really cared about each other and they were able to have a great year and win the state championship. So it's all about the guys who've been homegrown at the school really accepting the kids who are transferring in.
That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that was one of the better points brought up.
No, and I remember the days where it was like, where Nolan, for example, back in the day, right? Where I heard stories of the years of Nolan where it was like you would have a new kid at Nolan every single week. And you would just show up to class one day and be like, you just saw a new kid in class and be like, oh, okay. And, the thing about that, though, is, they had dominance for years, but the guys who have been there for so long, who, grew up in the ranks, been there since preschool, their spot gets taken. If they're all right, we're finally in, their high school years, we're able to go play and they're not able to play and they start on varsity. And you also have that argument. That hurts for a lot of kids who've been up through the ranks of, watched high school, when they were in elementary school in the stands watching their high school, and have that dream of playing, all right, I'm going to go play ball for that school. It's a tragedy and, it is an interesting thing where, also in private school, you have to take a test to come into a lot of schools and you have to deal with that. And, do you have the academics? Do you have the GPA? Do you have the care to like actually, pass your classes and worry about that as well. So that's a little bit, academically, private schools are usually higher, depends on the school, of course, but that's usually the stigma. So, it's an interesting thing where, that's a good point Caleb brings up is, I mean, you have to mesh well and bring into the culture of the school where, you just can't get a transfer in and then, how many times, Wes, have we seen over the years where a guy supposedly transfers in after a month or so, you don't see them there anymore because they just didn't fit in. So it happens. And that's a great point for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll use this to tease. I think in the coming weeks, we're going to have, somebody that I'm very good friends with that I started a podcast with a long time ago that was in the game and got recruited by a school and actually went through that transition of almost recruiting from or transferring from one school to another. We're going to have an episode, I think, just talking about that. So this is a nice teaser for that. So stick around. I think it's going to give a really good perspective. It's kind of just going to be, three guys that played private school ball talking about the implications of what that has become. But that being said, we've got one last storyline before we let the interns go here, and that is how realignment will change the title hopes for next season. We already did a kind of emergency podcast regarding realignment. There's a lot of shakeup. I think probably the biggest news, you can correct me if this is incorrect, Walker, or this isn't going to be correct, but correct me if it's not the biggest news, is Liberty moving up from TAPS Division 2 to TAPS Division 1. I'm going to ask right now, does Liberty become the Division 1 favorite just from moving up a division next year?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it might be that simple. Listen, I'm not going to slight Parish because, 5 straight state titles. I almost fell into the trap of kind of wanting to get cute and maybe take St. Thomas, but I think I'll be a little bit wary of immediately picking Liberty next season just because Parish has navigated those waters for so long. But Liberty's going to be really, really good moving straight up. I'll open it up to the interns who got to watch Liberty in that state title game. At least Cole, you watched both Parish and Liberty at state. Do you think Liberty moving up a division next year? Do you think they're the title favorite? Number 2, do you think they have a strong chance to compete for it if not?
I think Liberty is the title favorite just because of the amount of talent they have coming back with Chase Garnett, both of those big offensive linemen coming back, the Witten brothers coming back, and obviously Jason within there, he's going to stay there. And, over the last few years, in the offseason, there's been uncertainty with Novikov getting job offers here and there, yada, yada, yada. There's been rumors about that. I'm sure he stays another year, and I'm sure he gets his guys in once again. Sawyer Anderson's coming back. It's hard to say who the favorite is at this point, but I would have to go with Liberty just because of the momentum they have right now. Parish was kind of on the downfall this year. Granted, they had 2 losses to 2 teams currently playing in the UIL 5A state championship games. Can't be too hard on them for that. But then they also beat one of those teams last year. And they, again, won state in UIL 5A. So they may be on a little bit of a decline. And that, like we talked about earlier, winning championships is what brings players in. But not winning them as dominantly won't bring in as many players. Liberty ran through their schedule 14-0, winning, I think, every game by double digits, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they'll win the recruiting battle, which is another thing that we talked about at the state games, was the DFW recruiting battle between Witten and Novikov, which is going to be epic. Got to get our popcorn ready for that one. And I think Witten, it's a Dallas Cowboys Ring of Honor and future NFL Hall of Famer. Why would you not want to play for him? So I think Witten wins the recruiting battle. I think Liberty goes on to win and beat Parish in the state game by 15.
Ooh. Man, there's nothing I like more than way too early season predictions, and that's a fiery one. It's dude, it's going to be interesting. Not only watching the recruiting battle that takes place in the offseason, like you mentioned, but the on the field game that will inevitably occur. Caleb, this is something you played against Liberty. Obviously, you followed Parish throughout the season. Going into next year, do you agree with Colbert's sentiment that Liberty is probably the title favorite moving into 2024?
Yes, I do believe Liberty will be the title favorite in 2024. The heat zone over the DFW area between Coach Novikov and Coach Witten there is going to be insane. Both tremendous programs. One kind of is a little, I guess I wouldn't say rocky, but maybe on the slight decline a little bit. And one that's just shooting straightward up. So it's going to be fun to watch. I think Liberty's going to win state. And I'll be interested to see which the recruiting battles that will take place.
Okay, I do have to say, because both of you did mention like Parish being quote unquote rocky or on a decline. Like that is the only reason we're saying that is because Parish has been so dead good. They just won a state championship, keep in mind, this year. And it's just because they've been so dominant last year. It's just it's slipping. They slipped up against two great UIL teams. They got clipped by EHS, and they still, you got to remember, they still beat great teams like Prestonwood in the playoffs. And granted, D1 as a whole was down a little bit this year. That's no secret. But Parish, I think that's true. I think the North was down.
They were down, but I felt like South was up.
I agree. Sorry, I meant to say, whenever I was saying that, I should have said I'm the North. The South was up, and I do think the South was up.
I want to add into another school, and I'll do my encyclopedia knowledge about the rest of the realignment after we talk about this subject. But a school in Division I that we're not talking about enough, I think Prestonwood is also going to be in that battle for recruiting next year. How many guys? Kellen Tasby, Jack Harwell, Madison, the corner, but
yeah.
Takashi Shaw from TCA too came with Harwell.
Exactly. It's not like they don't like to use the transfer portal as well. And if they almost beat them this year, they almost beat Parish this year, almost beat STH. I'm just gonna say, Donnie Antis is not afraid to go and try to be a battle with the big boys as well.
No, it's going to be incredibly exciting. Waverly West, we haven't heard your comments yet on this. It's an incredibly fun subject. So I'll start with the question: do you think Liberty becomes the immediate title favorite, and just any general observations regarding what's going to be just some fantastic competition in D1 next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think y'all definitely touched on how Liberty is just insanely good, and I don't want to make a prediction quite yet, but it's going to be a battle. But I feel like also it's just good for the sport. Parish has won, like we said, 5 straight, and just having not the same team being good every year. Maybe Liberty wins it next year, and it just is good to have some variety and gets more people involved, and it really shows how private school football just reaches a lot of people, and that's going to be a really fun thing to watch next year.
Absolutely. It's going to be incredibly fun. So Walker, we talked about in the last 7 or 8 minutes, we talked about one team regarding realignment. There's a lot of news, TCS moves up, Austin, well, the Division II districts are all just, I've had my opinions on that, but what are your thoughts regarding kind of the macro view of realignment?
In the South, let's talk early. STH stays up there in Division I. I think everything else kind of stays the same. Maybe San Antonio Christian moves down. I honestly don't know on the top of my head. But anyways, that district is gonna be good. Mason Hartwell will be at the helm of St. Thomas, and they're gonna probably be the favorites in that division in the South. I love Mason Hartwell. I think he's gonna be a great player for them for years to come. Going into Division II, All Saints probably becomes the favorite now in Division II to win the state championship next year. Keldon Ryan and a lot of those other guys, Cuse Williams and Ian Bothwell, they all stay. They become the favorites in Division II next year. On the southern side, Cypress moves up to Division II to compete with Fort Bend and Second Baptist, who all 3 of those teams are going to be a bloodbath for who gets first place in that district. So that's going to be fun to watch. And then Regents probably, Regis might be the favorite. You can make an argument that Regis is probably the favorite in Division II next year coming out of the South. They have a deep sophomore class. Quinn Murphy will come back at the helm and, be probably the best player in Division II next year. Him and Keldon probably are going to argue with that role, but still, or no, Max Granville. I'm sorry, Granville.
I will mention really quickly in D2, talking about District 2, Brook Hill also moves back up from Division III. Brook Hill's traditionally been a Division II school. I'm interested to see how they do in that division because I think they can beat teams like Hyde Park, Brentwood, Dunn, Grace Prep, maybe. They didn't, they got whacked by DC. They got overshadowed in D3 a lot because they were in DC's division. But I think Brook Hill, if you've ever been out to Brook Hill, first of all, those facilities are immaculate. They are beautiful. They also, they got a boarding school. They recruit very well from the greater Tyler area. I'm very interested to see how they can be poised to compete in District 2.
Yeah. And that also puts, if they do it like the playoffs last year, because they're now District 2, right? There's still 4 districts, but District 3 is now just 4 teams. But that puts Regents on one side of the bracket, not the south. They're on now the north side of the bracket. I'd say they would play All Saints in probably the semifinal matchup, which that'll be a fun one. But then on the other side, yeah, then Fort Bend, Second Baptist, or Cypress Christian is probably the favorite out of the South next year. So that's gonna be interesting to watch. Division 3, Lubbock Christian moves up into D3, which is gonna be fun. That helps teams like Brazos Christian and First Baptist compete for the Division 4 title. But you know, they have to run up the lines of DC, and you don't even know who DC is going to look like next year. So DC, Lubbock Christian, TCS Lubbock's now in the Division 2. Those are probably the two favorites out of the North. And the South, Holy Cross with Cypress Christian moving up. They're probably the favorites in the South coming out of the South. Bernie, Geneva, but Rosenthal's not going to be there anymore. So I don't honestly know who else out of the South Bay area, maybe. But yeah, probably those two teams out of the South. And then in Division 4, Hallettsville lose Nick Angerstein, Brady Haas, Austin Kutak, I believe, is at 24 as well, or 25. So they are probably not a favorites out of there. Central Texas Christian loses Tabor Tyson. My encyclopedia knowledge is going crazy right now. Those two teams. Northland might be with Rome Stanford, might be a favorite out of there, and Brazos Christian
They'll be good.
Yeah,
they'll be good next year. They were young this year, and I think they're gonna get a lot better next year.
So Northland, Brazos, with Cooper Murray at the helm as a freshman, right? Yeah. So them, and they have a couple other junior guys that I'm excited to watch. So them probably in the South are probably the favorites, depending on where that district aligns and who gets on what side of the bracket. And then First Baptist with, talented sophomore and junior class, they come back and are probably the favorites out of Division 4 next year. So that's your little encyclopedia knowledge for you.
Yeah, just really quickly, I've got to read through Division 3 District 2 and the division that DC is in. Tyler Bishop Gorman, McKinney Christian, the Covenant School, Dallas Shelton, Tyler All Saints. Again, like I said, our good friend No Context put out a tweet whenever this was released, and I think it goes along the lines of, this is going to lead to war crimes. This district should not be allowed in any way, shape, or form. Do you know what DC playing Tyler All Saints is going to look like? A bloodbath. It's going to make what Trinity Christian did to Grace and all the other schools look like competitive football games. I got a DM right when this got released, and I was talking about it from a source that I now think was incorrect, that said Gorman and All Saints immediately went independent whenever this was released. I can see it happening. I haven't gotten any official word on that. If I was Gorman or All Saints, I would immediately go independent if I knew I had to play DC. Because, again, no slight to my Tyler schools, but it's going to be nasty. That being said, again, DC is going to be the clear favorite in Division 3. Holy Cross still brings a lot back. That'll be interesting. That being said, Walker, you hit on the rest of it really well. It's going to be interesting. There is a lot of shakeup, as there always is. In realignment. It's always very fun content to put out, but it'll be a fun time. So Walker, before we let the interns go and we go about the rest of our business, any thoughts, comments, concerns on what we've talked about up to this point?
Yeah, no, on that last topic, it's gonna be interesting to see who goes independent out of a lot of these districts. Savio goes into one of those districts. Do they say independent? There's multiple other schools in that Division 2 District 4, that Houston district. There's so many teams, some of them are gonna go independent. But besides that, I'm glad for the first year in a while there was a lot of competitive matchups in state championships, and I was really happy that there's some parity this year, and I was really, really glad about that. Look at the preseason, I believe we had for Division 1 we had we had Parish 1 and then Prestonwood 2, so we were a little bit wrong about that, but we still had the state champion. Division 2, we were right in putting Liberty over All Saints, and we chose them, and I think Regents was 3, so we weren't wrong about that. And then Dallas Christian over Cypress, we were still right about that. Lubbock Christian, we ranked higher than First Baptist, so we were right about that, or wrong about that. And then in SPC, we had Bel Air winning it over St. John, so we were right about the winner, wrong about the loser, and we were perfect on the SPC 3A, Trinity Valley over Houston Christian. So,
absolutely. Well, again, that just goes to show maybe we know ball a little bit. Maybe we'll see. That's up for debate. A lot of people on Twitter will tell you otherwise, but that's neither here nor there. Guys, in terms of the interns, Colberg, I'll start with you, then we'll move to Waverly and Caleb. First of all, thank all of y'all for joining us. Y'all's help
Yep.
at state was fantastic. Before we kick y'all off here, just closing comments, thoughts regarding state, and just getting to cover that.
It was an amazing experience getting to learn, especially behind the camera, because, Dallas Christian and with my own little Mole Mafia thing, I'm an in front of the camera guy. It's what I've done. But getting to learn behind the camera and shoot videos was an absolute blast and a really important skill to know going into the sports media world. So I was really thankful for that opportunity. The hospitality room was pretty good. They had barbecue chicken Papa John's that I had never had before, and that was phenomenal.
That was
I
good.
think I had 4 pieces and a Dr. Pepper for lunch that day. Good time there. So thank you, Taps, for providing that. And thank you all for providing this amazing experience. It was a great idea with the internship thing. That was genius on y'all's part. And I was so blessed to be a part of it and loved every second of it that I could get to contribute.
Thank you to the greatest mullet in sports media, Colberg. Waverly West, closing comments.
Yeah, Cole said it all. This whole experience, but especially the state championships, was such an incredible opportunity. I got to do a lot of post-game interviews, which was an absolute blast. I got to talk to so many fun people, some coaches, and just like everyone was so thankful. And that was just so cool to see the joy on everybody's faces after they were crowned state champions. Other than that, I'm just excited to see where TXPS Media goes after this, and thank y'all for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Caleb Corum, the second fastest man in TXPS Media, closing comments and concerns. Yeah, Walker Lott, I guess, the fastest.
Oh yeah.
No, Walker, hopefully maybe next year we can run it back again and
Oh,
see,
absolutely.
who
Absolutely.
the fastest is. But yeah, this was an awesome experience for me before going off to college. Wanted to get some real world experience, and these guys gave me that opportunity and was able to run with it. Had an absolute blast covering state, getting to hang out with everybody a part of this crew and get to see where everyone's from. And I got to network a little bit, go out of myself and go out and interview some players after the games. And shout out to all the Taps people, very nice and very humbled and thankful that I got to do this.
Absolutely. Like I said, we're a broken record. We can't thank all of y'all enough. Our content would not have been close to what it was this year without y'all's contributions. And also, even more so than that, I'm going to steal what Walker said to me whenever Walker came up at the end of the D4 game. And we're always like, listen, like at the end of the D4 game, it's been a long weekend of games. We're tired. The energy's down a little bit. And it was the exact opposite this year. Getting to talk with all of y'all, having all of y'all on the sidelines and having our own little crew, dude. It was the most fun I've had in a long time. I can't say enough good things. Thank you to all of you from all of us. It has been fantastic. It's been a blast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that being said, we'll take a brief intermission. We'll release the interns. Thank y'all so much. We will see y'all back here in just a second. All righty. Hello and welcome back. We started with 5. We're going to end with 2. We sent the interns on their way. Again, huge thank you to all of them. We've said it a ton before, but our content is much better with them. They're all fantastic. Go check them out. But we've got 2 more segments to get through. The first are going to be standouts that we saw at state. Now, there's a bit of criteria here. We're going to shout out seniors that are uncommitted, just guys that we think need more love from colleges that we saw at state that could help any collegiate program. So, Walker Lott, Division I, tell us who on each side looked incredibly good, who is a senior, who is uncommitted.
Yeah, that receiving core for St. Thomas, Luke Edgecombe is one of the best receivers in the state, Larry Benton as well, and also the tight end Blaze Covington are 3 guys definitely colleges coaches need to go look after. They're long, they're lanky, they're athletic, they're all going to be great value to your team. I think Larry and Luke are definitely Division I talents at receiver, and I think Blaze Covington is one of the most underrated tight ends in the state. Give them some love. Offensively, Jacob Husband, the offensive lineman, is a guy who's like 6'6", 6'7". Is still very, very raw, but can be a valued asset to any college program. He is like light on his feet. He has the size and the strength to back it up. He's going to be a key piece for any roster in the college. And also on defense, Keenan Bonner and Aaron Valentine as defensive backs were great players all year. And I think, Aaron Valentine at like 6'3" is a key asset for any college program. Keenan Bonner is a guy who has, college blood in him with, his older brother playing at Baylor right now. And, was a great asset, was a key piece of that DB room that was very, very good at helping him get to the state championship. Also, defensive lineman Dominic Ori was a great defensive tackle for them, helped them control the line of scrimmage all year. Do you want to do Parish?
Absolutely. Yeah. Caleb Bowers is an absolute dude. Like whenever I mentioned on a couple podcasts ago, whenever that dude stepped on the field coming back from injury, immediate game changer. That dude could add so much value to any college program. He needs to be snatched up. And then also the offensive line comprising of Nate Weber, Jacob Pequeno, and Nick Ferris. That offensive line doesn't move without those guys. They're three fantastic, seasoned, very, very elite players. Again, would add a ton to any collegiate program. Also, defensive lineman Ty Whitty, just an absolute terror when he gets on the field. Like I said, all of those Parish guys, 5 straight state championships. It doesn't happen without really key players. Any college program would be more than happy to have those guys. So moving into D2, Walker, you take the South and tell us about Austin Regents.
Yeah, by the way, these are guys who are uncommitted prospects. There's of course guys on both sides of the ball, like, Johan or Maddox Reed, who are already committed. So we just want to shout out the uncommitted guys. For Austin Regents, Hudson Powell, Chili Sayer, offensively are two guys that were phenomenal all year. I think Chili Sayer is one of the best running backs in TXPS, and he's just underrated, man. At 6'1", runs a 4.5. He has the size and the speed to match his just athleticism, and he would be a great contribution to any collegiate locker room. It's the same with Hudson Powell. Hudson Powell is a Division I player. He is getting looks by PWOs, but I think someone needs to pull the trigger, and he'd be a value asset to your team. Like I've always said, 4'5", 340, 82-inch wingspan, 6'7". That's all you need to hear, baby. Jacob Wilburn is a guy who was 3 years All-State or 4 years All-State. Since his freshman year, he started as a freshman. Started as DB, moved into linebacker, and that the athleticism to do both over his 4 years is just a testament to him, and he's a great asset. Division I offered linebacker. Go take a look at him. And also William Johnson, versatile guy for them, but I think he played linebacker, played some defensive line for them. Valued piece of that the Regis defensive front. Go take a look at him and go watch that film.
Absolutely. On the Liberty side, a ton of talent. Some guys that are seniors that are unsigned that would make a great addition to any college program. Max Saul, we mentioned him so many times throughout the season. The dude is an absolute mauler, just lives in the backfield, eliminates quarterbacks, would make a fantastic addition to any college program. Also, joining him on the defensive line is defensive tackle Murphy Wren, 6'1", 225, another guy that if you give him a shot to get in the backfield, he absolutely takes it, would absolutely fit anywhere. Also, center Antonio Simone. Again, we talk a lot about Nate Humphreys and Keithan Smith. Antonio Simone is also a really key player on this offensive line, can absolutely go play at the next level. Also, Michael Stump, a guy that I talked a lot about, not only at wide receiver, but also just as good of a kicker. Automatic on extra points, can move out to 40, 50 yards, kick field goals. That dude is a stud. All of these guys on, it says a lot to even just start on a team like Liberty. All these guys starters, all these guys contributors, big time ball players.
Yeah, going down to Division III, I'll let you do the DC side, but two guys, because there's not that many seniors for Holy Cross this year, but two guys, Jeremiah Vallejo, Daniel Alonso. Daniel Alonso might be one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the state. How he dominated DC this game in state championships. I watched him against Antonian. He was impressive physically, but watching him truly this game against DC was very, very impressive against one of the best defensive lines in Division III. He dominated. And Jeremiah Vallejo, you're not going to find a harder, more hard-hitting linebacker than Jeremiah Vallejo. He puts up his body on the line, everything he has for his team, and who doesn't want that on a college team? So definitely go take a look at those two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just take a second to say Vallejo was one of, if not the most impressive player in the state game on the defensive end. That dude is a beast. Any college program needs to go and take him. He is fantastic. Also on the Dallas Christian side, guys like Devontae High, Jaden and Katori Crawl. I mean, so daggum underrated. Like I said with Liberty, to even start on this Dallas Christian team is a fight in itself, and to make plays at that level is incredibly difficult. Also, Chris Scott, DJ Lampkins playing linebacker. Both of those guys are absolute studs. Not only physical presences, but also both very smart, don't make mistakes, fill gaps, just stuff that you want and is incredibly vital at the next level. Aiden Wirtz on the offensive line, huge stout player. Him, Porter Nix, guys like that, incredibly talented. Corey Taylor is a guy that I've talked a ton about him this season, an electric playmaker, a guy who you just get the ball in his hands and he makes plays. He is fantastic. And also to close it out, Jaden Davis, one in a long line of fantastic Dallas Christian running backs, smart, elusive, get the ball in open space, gets to the crib, fantastic player, just a ton of great unsigned seniors on this Dallas Christian team.
Yeah. Going into Division IV, I'll let you talk about First Baptist. I'll take Lubbock. Luke Lee is a guy who's one of the better athletes in all of Division IV, all state as an athlete, first team all state. One of the better guys who just, had to be plugging in as a quarterback, but is an exceptional athlete at receiver. Joseph Fernahel has been a guy who made first team all state last year as a receiver, probably made it again this year. One of the most underrated dudes at receiver in Division IV all season and for the past couple of years. Dude he's a great ball player. Go take a look at him. Brady Simmons is a guy, the running back for Lubbock Christian is a bigger, stout back, but he's able to be athletic and run the ball really, really well. And Matthew Pascuzzi is a guy who plays offensive line for them because, of course, it's Division IV, but it's probably true position is probably at a linebacker role. Key piece for that Lubbock Christian defense, makes plays. Go take a look at that film, man. Very, very impressive.
Absolutely. In D4, for First Baptist, Abuchi Godwin is a guy from the second I saw him in the spring is just screams Division I talent. He's like 6'6", long, lanky, just fantastic defensive edge product. Literally his first season playing football this year made an instant impact. Any team would be incredible. He's the definition of steal. If you can get him, he's going to make your team a lot better. Hunter McCoy as well. I don't know how you can talk about this First Baptist team without talking about Hunter McCoy. Hunter McCoy is one of the most dynamic playmakers we've ever seen in Texas private school football. It would be an injustice for me to describe it with words. Go turn on his film from his junior and his senior year. That will say enough. He's a fantastic quarterback and can also literally play anywhere on the field. Kid just needs a shot. Guarantee you he will make the most of it. Also, 6'3" offensive lineman Jackson Shamlin, a guy that did a great job of protecting Hunter McCoy, whether he was throwing or scrambling. Like I said, 6'3", heavy set, great prospect, everything you're looking for. So 3 guys that are incredibly good for First Baptist and can play at the next level. So that will conclude guys that unsigned seniors that we really stood out to us at state and throughout the season. So to close out the program, we're going to talk about not just the best players we saw at state, but the best players that we saw throughout the season, just going through covering games. We're not going to use any guys from state winning teams so we can get kind of a more rounded view of what we saw this season. So both Walker and I have about 4 to 5 guys at each position from quarterback to defensive back. So Walker, let's start at the quarterback position where everything runs through some guys that stuck out to us this year.
Yeah, I have to start out with Dante Lewis, one of the most exceptional quarterbacks I've ever seen at this level. Just very, very impressive and definitely, I think he's going to go play D1 football, but he's going to be even better baseball player at Kansas State. So shout out to him. Quinn Murphy's a guy that, 6'2", grew like 4 or 5 inches over the summer and, is now 6'2" now. One of the best. He's going to be probably the best quarterback in 2026 in the state. Phenomenal player. Regents is lucky to have him. Definitely, you're going to see a lot of colleges after this season's tape really go take an interest in him. Another guy, Carson Gordon, was a guy that, when we watched him last year, we were like, oh, this guy's the real deal. Dominated all season, beat Parish, went and won the state championship. And that resulted in him being the guy that Chip Kelly wants at UCLA. Great, great player. Shout out to him. 2 underrated guys that I really, really like. Leighton Riviere over at Savio is one of the most underrated cats in all of private school. He's the second best quarterback in Austin behind Quinn, and that's no slouch because Quinn's the real deal, and he's also the real deal. Leighton Riviere can throw a beautiful ball, and the guys he had around him made him even better, and he's an exceptional talent. Colleges need to be all over him, and I know he's taking visits, so shout out to him. I saw you at Hardin Simmons wearing the TXPS hat, repping us. Shout out to you, man. Appreciate that. But also Jace Toscano. Jace Toscano is one of the most underrated guys in all of TXPS. He's cool, calm, and collected, makes the throws he needed to, and he's also very versatile, the dual threat person that he is. He makes plays happen. That's what you want on a team. I know he's probably not going to play football at the next level, but he might walk on, you never see, but he's a great player. Any college would be lucky to have him. couple honorable mentions. David Capobianco at Kincaid made some impressive throws when I saw him in the St. John's game, and also the the Episcopal game in the state championship. Stephen Gill on the other side. Stephen Gill is one of the most underrated guys in Houston. Trinity is going to get a steal in Stephen Gill. He's about to light up D3 for years to come. And Kellen Tasby, the Tulane commit, was as advertised in that St. Thomas game, throwing the ball all over the field, making plays with his legs, which also surprised me.
Absolutely, yeah. A bunch of great guys, a bunch of great Southern quarterbacks. In terms of mine, I have Keldon Ryan, Carson Gordon, Brett Kilchrist, Gavin Parkhurst, and Ian Pulte from Fort Worth All Saints, Bel Air Episcopal, Houston Christian, Trinity Valley, and Legacy Christian, respectively. All these guys are great. Obviously, we've talked a lot about how good Keldon and Carson are. And Gavin as well, two really underrated guys, and Brett Kilchrist and Ian Pulte. I think both of those guys, Kilchrist absolutely is a college ball player, like we've talked about with a bunch of these guys we listed previously. Ian Pulte is a fantastic quarterback and a very stacked 25 class. The way he was able to throw the ball in that quarterfinal game against Southwest, he was very talented. So all of those guys, incredible talents, and we got a UCLA level quarterback in there as well, and a Virginia Tech guy. So no shortage of talent in private school as always. Walker, let's move down to running back.
Yeah, running backs, Johan Cardenas, enough said. Vandy commit, sensational. Chili Sayre, I talked about him a little bit earlier. Great player, 4.53 at 6'1". Great player. Go take a look at him. Cole Allen. I mean, there's not a more underrated guy in Houston than Cole Allen. What he did for that St. John's team kept him so close to the state championship appearance, and he's just sensational, and he had a great year, dominated a lot of teams over the years. DeBoard Tyson, a guy from Central Texas Christian, even though he's around 5'8", stout, but he does not quit. He has 100% left in the tank in the fourth quarter and does not stop, and that's how he wins against other teams. Just a dominant player at that level. Definitely a college would love to have him. Miles Rader was a guy that, it's gonna be bad how I'm saying this, but he shouldn't be as good as he is when you look at him, if that makes sense. But he is just a dominant player, and he was the engine of that Kincaid team. When you look at him, you're like, that's Miles Rader, and then you watch him play, and it's night and day. And how he dominated opposing teams, where, like, I remember Episcopal parents were like, just don't kick him the ball and kick off, because he would run it all the way to the other side. That's just who he is. Dominant player. You saw it this season, how much he meant to that Kincaid team. Great player. Honorable mention, Bork Toller, Romarian Tillman from Fort Bend, Brandon Thomas from Episcopal, and also John Kelly from Cypress Christian.
Absolutely. The four guys that I got are Grace Community, or not Grace Community, Grant Turner from Grace Community, Bradley Perez from Midland Christian, Clayton Sebecki from Grapevine Faith, and Ben Nagishu from Trinity Valley. All four guys that I think could go in the underrated category. Grant Turner is, my good Lord, one of the best single game performances I've seen covering the sport. Put up 6 touchdowns. I think it was 6 against Grapevine Faith. Shifty, elusive, fast, hard to tackle. Any adjective you want to use to describe him. Fantastic talent. Needs to go play ball at the next level. Bradley Perez, I remember watching against Grace on my phone in the first round game, and every time he touched the ball, I just assumed he was going to the house. Just a crazy talent for the Mustangs. Clayton Sebecki, the Air Force commit, just time and time again, is consistency is the word that comes to mind. Every game he shows up. And I guess technically I don't know why I've got him in the running back position. He should be in the quarterback position because that's what he played this year, but he's just such a dynamic athlete. He's going to be a fantastic talent at the next level. Also, Ben Nagishu, the last guy I mentioned, a fantastic player for Trinity Valley, a guy that put in a lot of work over the offseason to get bigger, stronger, faster. It paid off dividends, a fantastic talent for TVS. Let's move on down to wide receiver.
Yeah, I talked about Luke Edgecombe and Hudson Powell a little bit ago, but very, very impressive athletes. Those are definitely two of my guys. Riley Strode, I know Wes also has him on his list. Ball player, man. Any team would be lucky to have him. What a player. David Duplantier is a guy who I think is so underrated in TXPS. 6'4", 6'3", maybe now probably 6'2" to 6'3". Ball player, goes up and gets it, can play DB as well. Just a ball player that you want on your team. Athletic as heck, and just makes any catch you needed to do. That was Leighton Revier's main guy on that squad. I think he's a sensational player. Another guy, Nick Angerstein at the Division 4 level was just so much fun to watch. He's a great kicker, and that's where he's going at the next level, but athletic too. Dominated the Division 4 level, one of the best wide receivers, and he showed why week in and week out. Honorable mentions, of course, are Larry Ben, who I definitely think if you gave him the ball more in that state championship game, they could maybe have been a different game because no one could cover him. But also Blake Smith. Blake Smith was so much fun to watch this year. What an athletic guy at such a young age. Only a sophomore, he's gonna be awesome for years to come.
Absolutely. The guys that I had were Hutch Crow from Parish, Gunnar Nyvar from Prestonwood, Riley Strode from Mantonian, Cade Croffler from Fort Worth Christian, and Kevin Doddard from All Saints. Guy, just as a collective, just a fantastic list. Really hard to see Hutch Crow only play in about, I think it was 3 games this season. Just so, one of the most dominant players I've seen step in at the wide receiver position. Just any team he played against, it was like a 200-yard game immediately. Gunnar Nyvar as well, incredibly underrated. A guy that just went up and get it. Him and Tag O'Neill should be on this list as well. Those guys for Preston were both fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Riley Strode, you hit on very well. Just since we started watching him as a sophomore, has been fantastic. Cade Croffler is another very underrated guy from Fort Worth Christian that I liked a ton. And Kevin Doddard, both Kevin and Dougie, man, and Quamante Williams, all 3 of those guys from All Saints just went up, made Keldon's job easy. Just go up, get the ball. Then guys like Kevin's case, throw on the screen, 50 yards to the house, easy money. All guys that are elite at wideout.
Yeah, moving on to offensive line. We're starting out with Anthony Pellerin. Anthony Pellerin is a dude. He's versatile. He's athletic. He's strong. He's physical. There were so many times in that state game we were like, all right, what's Pellerin doing? Oh, he's already pancaked. So I'm going, that's just who he is. I've said it since last year, the best center in all of TXPS. Any team would be lucky to have him. I think he's a Division 1 talent, no doubt. Daniel Alonzo was a guy that we've heard about since week 1 when I watched him against Antonian, another dominant guy, and he showed in the state championship game. Why we already talked about him a little bit earlier. Colin Witt and Billy Wheelis, the 2 offensive linemen for Episcopal this year, were phenomenal, helping Carson Gordon be who he is. Him and the rest of that offensive line were just phenomenal, and you got to give shout out to those 2 guys, multi-year starters on the offensive line for Episcopal. That Brandon Thomas, Carson Gordon backfield would not have worked without those 2 guys. The last 2, Bennett Warren. There might have been not a more physically imposing dude who's also so raw as Bennett Warren. When we watched him as I saw him as a freshman when I went and saw Remington Strickland play, and we were like, okay, that's a guy to watch out for. And how he's developed his body and physicality every single year has shown in the offers he has, where it's not just built of potential, but also what he's actually been able to do. And this senior year proved it every single week, watching him dominate the line of scrimmage. Very, very impressive. Shout out to him going to Tennessee, Rocky Top baby. The other guy, RJ Lee, the 2025 offensive lineman from Second Baptist, has been on the scene, has a couple Division 1 looks now. Shout out to him. 6'8", maybe. I think he's now maybe 6'9". Physically imposing dude. Excited to go watch him next year. Just a man amongst boys when he's out on the field. Honorable mention to Jacob Husband. Talked about him a little bit earlier, but good prospect at the next level.
Absolutely. The 3 guys I got are junior Luke Wilson, and then seniors Cole Eldridge and Kristen DeMore from Grace Community, Fort Worth All Saints, Frisco Legacy, respectively. All guys that are smart, fantastic technique, and yet again, like I've said before, their teams don't win without them on the field. It's just you watch them, and the most important thing is they don't make mistakes. They go out there, they complete the job they're supposed to do, and they don't make mistakes. All 3 of these guys, just turn on the tape and watch their respective run games and pass protections do not work without them on the field. So Luke Wilson, Cole Eldridge, and Kristen DeMore, all fantastic offensive linemen from the northern realm of things. Moving on to the defensive line.
Going to the defensive line, Charlie Schroeder from Second Baptist, 6'7", and I believe he was like the one of the best defensive linemen in all of Houston this year. Every guy you talk to, coaches wise, you're like, oh, he's a ball player. And then when you have the coaches saying that, you know he's the real deal. I know he just decommitted from Rice. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. He's a Division I talent. Ivan Jimmy Ducksworth is a guy we've been talking about for years, man. Just a ball player. He makes every locker room better when he's in it, physically stronger than anyone you'll face. And just the athleticism behind him as well. Great player, even a better person. Shout out to him. Underrated guy, Bode Ferguson from Antonian Prep has the size and the athleticism to compete at like 6'2", 6'3". He's a physically imposing guy, has been a guy down in Houston or down in the South for Division I, who's been very, very impressive for the past couple years. Definitely a guy, if colleges need to go look at him, go take a look down there in San Antonio about him. Maximus Suppley is a guy that we found out this year about after watching him against Cypress and be like, okay, that kid's a junior. Oh, wow. And, he had the stats to back him up this year. First team All-State in Division III. Very, very impressive. And a guy I just have to shout out, J.R. Stegall. There's not a more physically imposing guy at Division II defensive tackle spot than him. At his size, 6'3", 290. Physically imposing, quick off of the line of scrimmage. Very, very impressive player. A couple other honorable mention guys. Tyler Cesarski at Bel Air Episcopal. Robbie Burslem at St. Dominic Savio, Jacob Rogers, Cypress Christian, DJ Beasley, and Michael Anthony Akura as well.
Alrighty, for my guys, I've got Jack Harwell and Nathan LePerry from Prestonwood, and I got Darius Colquat from Fort Worth All Saints. Another all-time hard name that I probably butchered a million times. Carquat, it's close. I probably should have. I talked to him for like 10 minutes after the quarterfinal game. I probably should have gotten a pronunciation there. That being said, all three of these guys are just scary. I can't imagine seeing either Harwell, LePerry, or Darius coming off the edge in Darius' cases and then through the middle like Jack. We've talked about Harwell since I think early last year. I mean, the dude is a freak. I mean, I can't imagine scheming to try and block him. Just an absolute bowling ball. The interior defensive line just goes out, mauls people. And then both Darius and Nathan are also scary as well. Darius, from a physical standpoint, 6'4", 210, and it's not fat. The dude's got a ton of muscle on him. All three of those guys are vital to their team success, get things done, hands down, some of the most impressive prospects on the defensive line in the state. Moving on to linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, Max Granville. I mean, there's not much to say about him. Real deal. Been offered by every school basically in the country. Go watch the film. It's a lot of fun. Talked about Jacob Wilborn earlier, but another guy who's physically imposing. Very, very impressive athlete. Ty Blevins. If you had 11 Ty Blevins on a defense, you'd win games. He's just a heart and soul of that Bel Air Episcopal team. Had a sensational year. Colleges need to be watching him. Tyler Day, Rice commit now. I think he's a dude. He talks the talk, but he walks the walk, man. And he's phenomenal. Been awesome to watch him the past couple years. Two honorable mentions: Bryce Butler, Second Baptist, running back turned linebacker, and was sensational this year. Also, Brady Haas from Hallettsville Sacred Heart, one of the defensive player of the year last year, and is going to be a big, probably nominee for this year again.
Absolutely. Moving down, I got Hudson Loneford from Prestonwood, Blake Harmon and Dylan Taylor from Grace Community, Madden Morgan from Bel Air Episcopal, and Jacob Maynard from Trinity Valley. All of these guys, yet again, are scary presences. Lunsford is a guy for Prestonwood who it's kind of like a Caleb Bowers for Parish. You have to know where he is at all times on the field, just has a knack for getting the ball. Both Blake Harmon and Dylan Taylor for Grace are two guys that I think the linebacking core was the strength of this Grace defense, and it's due in large part to just how physical both of those guys are. When I say physical, I mean they're really, really developed kids, just live in the weight room, live to knock heads. And I say that, and the next guy I'm talking about is the most physically developed guy on this list is sophomore Madden Morgan. Literally just a unicorn. I forget his exact stats. I think it's something like 6'1", 210, 215. Literally probably some like 7% body fat, something absolutely absurd. Turn on his tape. Madden Morgan is a name that we've all gotten familiar with. We're only going to become more so over the next 2 years. And then Jacob Maynard, the junior from Trinity Valley. Yes, the junior. Yes. Just a guy who we've been keyed onto for a while has a direct impact, a direct measurable impact on every game, goes out of state champion. So all 5 of those guys, extreme contributors to their team, had a blast watching them at linebacker this year. And last but certainly not least, a position you have to be a little bit of a psychopath to play, as I know because I played it, defensive back.
Yeah, a couple of guys I want to mention. Lou Lamar. There's not a more impressive guy that I've never seen live, and then watching him live, I went, "Oh, holy cow, this guy's insane." Is then Lou Lamar, physically imposing, athletic, and he's going to be a steal for Dartmouth this year. You're going to see a guy who's going to be an all-conference guy, I believe, at Dartmouth for the next couple of years. Braden Robinson, the 26 from Lutheran South, was a guy that I've been high on all year in the offseason as well. Just a really, really good player. Was a unit, or was a really, really important piece of this Lutheran South team. It's going to be exciting to watch him for the next 2 years. Jordan Rogers was a guy at Fort Bend where he was on my fantasy team this off season, but we did it, and he lived up to the hype and was a big piece of getting back to the quarterfinals for Fort Bend. Was a really, really important piece, and excited to see where he ends up at his senior year. Go turn on the film. Very, very impressive. Braylon Thompson, the Yale guy, I mean, was one of those crucial pieces for Episcopal winning the state championship this year. Multiple plays in that Parish game, multiple plays in the Kincaid game in the state championship. When it came down and you needed to play on defense, you looked to Braylon Thompson and he made those plays. Very, very impressive athlete. Aaron Valentine's my other guy on that list. Really, really good player. He showed it all year, and we talked about him a little bit more later. Couple honorable mentions. Andrew Novi, the 26 DB, was a guy who caught my eye. I'm excited to see him. Yaha Mir at Houston St. John's, the junior, is going to be one to watch next year.
Definitely so. The last 3 guys I got at DB are David Madison from Prestonwood, Riley Strode from Antony, and then Aiden Heck from Grace. David Madison physically is probably one of the most impressive corner prospects I've seen. I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", long. I need to get a wingspan on that dude. Turn on his tape. Just lives to alter passes and make offensive coordinators just have night terrors about him. Physically impressive, very good. Riley Strode is the only guy on this list that made mine twice, because that's how good he is, a defensive back as well. A guy I specifically remember last year in the Nolan game, just he was your best receiver, and then he goes and he locks down the other team's best receiver. He did the same thing this year. Fantastic player for Antonian. And then Aiden Heck for Grace is a guy that we didn't get to talk about a whole lot this year, but whether he's another two-way player, whether he's playing receiver or DB, just a kid, like you said earlier about another guy that doesn't look like you said, Miles Rader, that doesn't look like he should be as good as he is, but he is. Just affects plays, incredibly good, gritty, hardworking kid. All 3 of these players, fantastic DB prospects, and some of the best that I have seen. So that being said, that actually wraps up not only the best players we've seen this year, but also everything for the episode. It's probably going to run about 2 hours. We had a lot to talk about. We had some great input from all of our interns. Walker, another football season comes to a close. Our job is not finished, but in terms of the season as a whole, your thoughts and any other closing comments or concerns?
Yeah, I'm exhausted. This episode has drained me. But would I do it all again every single year? Absolutely. And, stay tuned. We're going to do the same thing next year. We're going to get even bigger and better. Thank you so much to those interns. Like you said earlier, Wes, I won't really repeat too much because you said it phenomenally, but the community, what we said when we started this is we wanted to build a community that we're all interactive and have a community that wants to build each other up and make private school football what we think it can be. And that's what we did this year. And we're continuing to do that every single year. It's been phenomenal for all the seniors we've met. Thank you for supporting us. It's been a journey. It's been an awesome journey watching all of y'all grow these past couple years and seeing what you've done for your programs at your schools. And I'm excited to see if you go play ball at the next level, where you end up. And if you ever need anything, give us a holler. Thank you to the parents, the coaches, everyone who supported us this year. I mean, without y'all, I think Wes put it in the tweet that, private school football is nothing without y'all. So we can't TXP media does not exist without the fans. So I really want to say thank you to everyone who supported us this year. It's been awesome. And man, we have some stuff in the works that we're excited about. Like we said last year, we're gonna go bigger, go home, and that's exactly what we're doing. So stay tuned for that award show. Right around the corner. We're gonna try to get it out as soon as possible. You have my word, as soon as possible. So would be nice if y'all started sending us your stats and all of that. But thank you everyone for supporting us. Wes, back to you, my guy.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it perfectly. I just kind of want to express gratitude and say that we can't thank all of you enough. Like Walker said, like I said in the tweet, the coverage of the sport doesn't happen without y'all and your support. And every year it grows exponentially, and it really moves me to see it. And like I said in the tweet, my favorite part of every Friday is, as much as I love covering the sport and watching football, my favorite part is getting the opportunity to talk with people in the community every Friday and every Saturday. And it really moves me, and it reminds me how much of a privilege this is whenever I get to talk with y'all and y'all express gratitude. So thank you. I can't say it enough. And yeah, I'll leave it on that note. So, as always, for myself, for Walker Lott, for Cole Burke, Waverly West, and Caleb Corum, thank you to our fantastic interns. I have been 1/5 of your hosting crew for this episode. We will see you in the next off-season episode. See you later.
3, 2, 1.